Captain Jace Riker was accustomed to the quiet of deep space. After years of navigating the vast, empty stretches of the galaxy, he found solace in the routine. His crew, a mix of experienced and eager individuals, followed his commands without question as they explored the unknown. However, as the Stellar Hawk drifted through the farthest reaches of the galaxy, something changed. The ship's sensors began picking up an anomaly, a signal that seemed to come from nowhere, with no clear source. At first, Jace thought it was just a glitch, but when it repeated, his curiosity piqued. He called a meeting with his crew in the command center. "We've been tracking this for hours," he said, his voice calm but alert. "Whatever it is, it's not a natural occurrence. I want a full analysis." The ship's lead scientist, Dr. Mara Calder, adjusted her glasses as she worked at the terminal. "It's unlike anything we've ever seen before," she replied, her brow furrowed. "The energy signature doesn't match any known species technology. It's almost as if it's calling to us." Jace leaned forward, considering the possibilities. "And you're sure it's not a trap?" Mara hesitated but then nodded. "No weapons have been detected in the signal's range. But there's something strange about it. It seems intentional, not random." The tension was palpable, but Jace trusted Mara's instincts. He ordered the crew to alter their course and move toward the signal. As they approached, the energy source grew stronger, drawing them in. It wasn't long before they arrived at an uncharted, decaying space station, its metal surface scarred by years of neglect. The station seemed abandoned, but the signal was unmistakable. The station was alive in some way, waiting for them. Jace stood at the helm of the Stellar Hawk, his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze steady on the screen. "Prepare to dock. Let's see what's waiting for us." The docking bay was quiet as the crew stepped off the ship. They wore their suits, prepared for anything, but the eerie silence of the station unnerved even the most seasoned among them. The halls were dim, lit only by faint lights flickering sporadically, casting long shadows across the walls. As they explored deeper into the station, they came across a strange room. Its door, unlike the others, was open. Inside, at the center of the room, stood a figure. It was humanoid, but unlike anything Jace had seen before. The being was wrapped in shimmering energy, her form shifting in an otherworldly way that made it hard to focus on her appearance. Her presence filled the room, a mix of power and calm that seemed almost tangible. "Who are you?" Jace demanded, his voice steady but guarded. His hand instinctively hovered near his weapon. The being's eyes locked onto his, glowing faintly with an inner light. "I am Lyra," she replied, her voice both melodic and distant. "And I've been waiting for you." Jace frowned, unsure of what to make of her words. "Why me? What is this place?" Lyra's form flickered again, as though she were caught between dimensions. "I chose you, human," she said, her gaze never leaving his. "Of all beings in the universe, I chose you, and you have no idea why." The air around them seemed to crackle with energy. Jace's mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. He was a space captain, used to navigating dangers and mysteries, but this was something far beyond his experience. Lyra extended a hand toward him, and without thinking, Jace stepped closer. "You are part of something much bigger than you realize," she continued. "The universe is in peril, and you are the key. But before you can understand why, you must first survive what's coming." Jace felt a chill crawl up his spine. He had heard many strange things in his career, but this felt different. "I don't understand," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "What do you mean? What's coming?" Lyra's gaze darkened. "The forces that will come for you are relentless. The galaxy has been waiting for someone to unlock what's been hidden for eons. And now they will stop at nothing to make sure that never happens." Just as Jace was about to ask more, a loud bang echoed through the station. The walls trembled, and the ground beneath them began to shake. Something was coming, and Lyra's warning was clear. Whatever was hidden in the universe was now stirring, and they had no time to lose. Jace turned to his crew. "We need to get back to the ship now." But as they rushed toward the docking bay, the shadows around them grew darker, and the sound of footsteps echoed ominously down the hallway. Whatever awaited them outside was not something they were prepared for. As Captain Jace Riker and his crew hurried back to the Stellar Hawk, the tension on the station grew thicker. The faint rumble of an approaching threat was unmistakable, and Jace's mind raced. They needed answers, and fast. Lyra had told him he was the key to something, but what did that even mean? He had lived his life as a space captain, navigating the unknown and facing down threats with his crew. But this was something else entirely. As they reached the docking bay, Jace motioned for everyone to stay alert. The strange presence of Lyra lingered in his thoughts, but the growing urgency of their situation was at the forefront of his mind. Just as the crew boarded the ship, the station trembled violently. The Stellar Hawk's engines roared to life, lifting the ship away from the station's crumbling structure. Jace sat in the captain's chair, his eyes scanning the stars, but his thoughts were miles away, consumed by Lyra's words. Captain Mara Calder, the ship's lead scientist, spoke up, breaking the silence. "We need to understand what happened back there. We can't just keep running without knowing what we're dealing with." Jace turned to face her, the weight of the situation pressing on him. "I know, Mara. But right now, we need to get out of this sector and find somewhere safe. We can talk more once we're clear." As the Stellar Hawk pushed into deep space, Jace allowed himself a moment to breathe, though his mind was far from calm. "Lyra," he muttered, as if speaking her name could give him answers. He looked out into the dark void of space, trying to piece together the strange encounter. Lyra was not just another alien being. There was something different about her. She had known who he was before they ever met, and now she was saying that he was the key to something far beyond his understanding. "I'm not the only one interested in you, Captain," Lyra's voice echoed softly in his memory. "There are others who have been waiting for centuries for the right time to act." What did she mean by that? Jace murmured, tapping his fingers on the armrest. He turned to Mara. "What do you make of it all? You saw her, heard her too." Mara sat back, her brow furrowed. Lyra wasn't just speaking in riddles. There's a truth behind her words. She spoke of something older than the stars themselves, an ancient power hidden from the universe for a reason. I can't explain it scientifically, but I believe she's telling the truth. Jace leaned forward. "Then why me? Why did she choose me?" Mara's voice softened as she glanced at the crew, who were all quietly listening. "I think she chose you because you're human. No offense, Captain, but there's nothing special about you, or any of us, compared to other species. But there is something about human beings that others can't replicate. Our unpredictability, our capacity for growth, our resilience in the face of the impossible." Jace stared at her, unsure if he wanted to hear more. "And that's why she thinks I'm the key." Mara nodded slowly. "It's possible. But there's more. I've been studying the records of ancient alien civilizations for years. Some species speak of a force, a power that can either bring about creation or destruction, something that has been locked away by many civilizations to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands." Jace's eyes narrowed. "You're saying this force is what Lyra was talking about?" Mara hesitated. "Yes, but I don't think it's just a weapon, Captain. I think it's something much more. And if Lyra's right, if it really has been hidden for centuries, then someone is looking for it. Someone very powerful." Jace's stomach tightened at the thought. "And if we're the ones to unlock it, then we're the ones they'll come after." Mara nodded grimly. "Exactly." As Jace stared out into the endless black of space, the weight of what lay ahead pressed down on him. Lyra's cryptic words replayed in his mind. He had no idea why he was chosen, or what the universe had in store for him. But one thing was certain: danger was on the horizon. His crew had signed up for exploration, not to be dragged into some galactic conspiracy, But now it was clear there was no turning back. "Captain," Mara said again, drawing Jace from his thoughts, "we can't just run forever. We need to figure out what's going on, and fast." Jace took a deep breath. He had always been a man of action. It was time to find the answers. "We'll find Lyra, and we'll figure out what she's really after. Then we'll take it from there." As the Stellar Hawk sailed deeper into space, Jace could only wonder what other mysteries the universe had in store for him, and what part he would play in them. Captain Jace Riker couldn't shake the feeling that something was closing in on him, something far bigger than anything he had ever faced before. The Stellar Hawk cruised through the darkness of deep space, but every star in the sky felt like a reminder that the universe was watching. Whatever Lyra had spoken of, the power, the prophecy, the enemies, he couldn't let go of it. His crew, though mostly still in the dark about the true extent of the situation, had also begun to feel the unease hanging in the air. "Mara," Jace said one morning as he studied the star charts, his voice steady but filled with concern, "we need to go somewhere safe, somewhere they won't find us." Mara Calder, his chief scientist and trusted advisor, looked up from her station with a frown. "Captain, we've already adjusted our course multiple times. The signal we intercepted was coming from a place that no one's mapped before, but hiding forever won't work. We'll need to learn more about this force and the people hunting us if we want to stand a chance." Before Jace could reply, an alarm blared, cutting through the silence of the ship. The warning was clear: incoming ships, and fast. Jace's stomach sank. He didn't need to ask who they were. He already knew. "Get to your stations," he ordered, his voice calm but urgent. "We've been found." The Stellar Hawk's crew scrambled into action as the distant shadows of enemy ships loomed ahead. Jace grabbed the controls, his hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. His mind raced. Who were these enemies, and how had they tracked them so quickly? "We've got incoming fire," Mara shouted from the tactical console. "Draxari ships, Captain. They've been tailing us ever since we left the station." Jace clenched his jaw. The Draxari were a ruthless alien species known for their cold, calculating strategies. They were conquerors, and they didn't care who or what they had to destroy to get what they wanted. The fact that they had found them so soon meant one thing: Lyra had been right. Whatever it was they were after, they were going to stop at nothing to get it. Evasive maneuvers, now. Jace barked, his voice sharp as he steered the Stellar Hawk into a series of fast turns, dodging the enemy ship's blaster fire. Mara's fingers flew across her console as she worked to give them the advantage. "I've locked onto their engines. We've got a few minutes before they can track us again, but we need to do some serious damage if we're going to escape." The ship shook as the Draxari fired again, their weapons hitting the hull with a deafening thud. Jace could feel the impact in the pit of his stomach, but he pushed through. The Stellar Hawk was built to survive this kind of assault, but only if they acted fast. "Get us to the asteroid field," Jace shouted, his eyes scanning the map. "We'll use the debris for cover." With a series of smooth yet desperate maneuvers, the Stellar Hawk dove into the asteroid field. The rocky terrain was a perfect place to hide, but it also made navigation difficult. Jace's hands were steady on the controls as he guided the ship through narrow gaps, weaving between asteroids. Every move felt like a gamble, but it was the only shot they had at losing the Draxari. "Their ships are right behind us," Mara warned, her voice tight with urgency. "We won't be able to outrun them for long." "We don't need to outrun them," Jace said, his voice low with determination. "We need to outsmart them." As the Stellar Hawk barreled through the field, Jace activated the ship's cloaking device. The sleek, advanced tech shimmered into action, making the ship nearly invisible to enemy sensors. The Draxari ships would no longer be able to lock onto their position easily, but the cloaking system wouldn't last long. They had to make their next move count. "Get ready for a fight," Jace said, his voice a quiet growl. "If they catch us, We're not getting out of here in one piece. Mara nodded, her face set in a grim expression. I've been ready. As the Stellar Hawk came to a sharp stop behind a cluster of asteroids, Jace quickly turned to his crew. We'll have to use everything we got to shake them. Once we're clear, we'll figure out what to do next. But just as he finished speaking, a voice filled the bridge, an unexpected voice. It was Lyra's, her presence filling the room, though she was nowhere to be seen. You cannot escape them, Jace, she warned, her tone calm but filled with an eerie sense of finality. The Draxari will not stop. They are relentless. You must face them, or you will never understand what is at stake. Jace felt a chill run down his spine. He had hoped for a chance to slip away unnoticed, but now he knew it was only a matter of time before the Draxari found them again. And when they did, there would be no more hiding. The Stellar Hawk shook violently as another blast struck its hull. Captain Jace Riker tightened his grip on the control panel, trying to maintain the ship's course through the asteroid field. The Draxari ships were closing in faster than expected, and their weapons were more advanced than anything Jace had ever encountered. His crew was doing their best to hold them off, but there was only so much they could do. Shields at 60%, Captain. Mara Calder called out, her voice strained. She was at the tactical station, her fingers flying over the controls as she tried to lock onto the Draxari ships. If they hit us again, we'll be in trouble. Jace didn't need to hear it. The feeling in his gut told him they couldn't keep this up for long. He glanced at the view screen, where the Draxari ships, sleek, dark vessels, were maneuvering with frightening precision, ready to strike again. It was only a matter of time before they closed in for the kill. We need to get out of here, Jace muttered. He thought quickly, his mind working at full speed. If they could make it to a nearby nebula, they could lose the Draxari. The dense clouds of gas would interfere with their sensors, giving the Stellar Hawk a chance to hide. Mara, can you get us to the nebula? Jace asked, his voice urgent. Mara didn't look up from her console, but she nodded. I can try, but I'm going to need your help in dodging their fire. Jace was already guiding the ship, weaving between asteroids and dodging the Draxari blasts. It was risky, but it was their only shot. Hold tight, Jace called as he executed a sharp turn, narrowly avoiding another volley from the enemy. The Stellar Hawk's engines screamed as they pushed harder, racing toward the nebula in the distance. The crew braced themselves, but the tension in the air was palpable. They were in a race for their lives. Just as they neared the edge of the nebula, a flash of light from the Stellar Hawk's aft caught Jace's attention. A small vessel, almost invisible against the backdrop of the asteroids, appeared out of nowhere. It was too small for the Draxari to have noticed, and it was moving fast. Where did that ship come from? Mara asked, her voice full of confusion. Jace squinted at the screen. The ship was darting toward them with surprising speed, and before he could react, the new vessel opened fire on the Draxari ships, taking them by surprise. The Draxari vessels were forced to break off, their attention now focused on this new enemy. Is that a friend? Mara asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Jace's eyes narrowed. I don't know, but we're taking this chance. The unknown ship continued to fire on the Draxari, striking their ships with precision. The Draxari hesitated, unsure of how to deal with this new threat. It was enough to give the Stellar Hawk the breathing room it needed. Captain, we're in the nebula. Mara called out. The Stellar Hawk was enveloped by the dense clouds of gas, the view screen now filled with swirling colors of purple and blue. The Draxari ships had lost their visual lock on them, and for the first time in what felt like hours, Jace allowed himself to relax, if only for a moment. The unknown ship had given them a chance, but they couldn't just hide forever. Whoever had helped them had done so out of some unspoken agreement, but Jace had no idea why. As the Stellar Hawk drifted deeper into the nebula, he turned to Mara. Can you get us a clearer read on that ship? He asked. Mara nodded and tapped a few buttons on her console. I'm trying. The nebula is messing with our sensors, but I should have something in a minute. Jace leaned back in his seat, his mind still spinning. The Draxari were relentless, and they would come after them again. But now, thanks to this mysterious ally, they had a chance to regroup. He couldn't afford to waste it. I'm going to hail them, Jace said, making up his mind. If they're here to help, we need to know who they are. We can't trust anyone in this situation. Mara didn't argue. She understood as well as Jace did that trust was a rare thing in deep space, especially when it came to strangers who suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Jace opened a communication channel to the unknown ship. After a few tense moments, the screen flickered, and a figure appeared on the other end. The person was humanoid, but their features were shrouded in shadows, their face obscured by a hood. It was impossible to tell anything about them, but one thing was clear: this person wasn't here to cause trouble. This is Captain Jace Riker of the Stellar Hawk, Jace said, keeping his voice steady. Who are you, and why did you help us? The figure on the screen remained silent for a moment, then spoke in a calm, deep voice. I am Vero. I've been watching you, Captain Riker. You're more important than you realize. Jace's brow furrowed. What do you mean? The Stellar Hawk glided silently through the vast emptiness of space, following the trail left by Vero's ship. The nebula had concealed them well, but they couldn't hide forever. Jace Riker couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to unfold. The warning Vero had given them echoed in his mind. You're more important than you realize. What do you think Vero meant by that? Mara Calder asked, breaking the silence. She sat beside Jace at the controls, her expression serious. And who exactly are they? I don't know, Jace admitted, his gaze focused on the flickering stars outside. But I've got a feeling we're not just running from the Draxari anymore. There's something else going on here. Something much bigger. As the Stellar Hawk continued its journey, the atmosphere on the ship grew tense. The crew was unsettled, though most didn't know why. The sudden appearance of Vero, a mysterious ally who claimed to be watching them, was both a blessing and a curse. Jace knew they couldn't trust anyone too easily, especially someone who appeared out of nowhere and offered help without asking for anything in return. We're coming up on the coordinates, Mara said, her voice breaking through Jace's thoughts. The screens ahead displayed a small, uncharted system, barely a blip on the map. There's a planet here. It looks uninhabited. That's where Vero is taking us? Jace asked. Seems like it. Jace's brow furrowed. A hidden planet, out of sight from the rest of the galaxy. It seemed like the perfect place to lay low, but also the perfect place for a trap. We should be cautious, Jace said. Let's not drop our guard just yet. The Stellar Hawk entered the system, and as they approached the planet's orbit, the ship's sensors detected no signs of civilization. The planet appeared untouched, its surface covered in dense forests and mountains. It didn't look like a place where anyone could hide a fleet, let alone a secret base. Prepare for landing, Jace ordered. Let's see what we're walking into. The crew braced themselves as the ship descended toward the planet's surface. The atmosphere was thick, but breathable, and the Stellar Hawk touched down gently on the rocky terrain. Outside, a steady wind blew across the barren landscape, but there were no signs of life. No cities, no colonies, not even a single animal in sight. Just endless fields and towering mountains in the distance. As the hatch opened and the crew filed out of the ship, they were greeted by the stark silence of the planet. The air was cool and crisp, but there was something eerie about the emptiness that surrounded them. Jace surveyed the area, his instincts on high alert. This planet felt off. It was as if it had been abandoned for a reason. Welcome, came a voice from behind them. The crew spun around to find Vero standing a few paces away, his figure emerging from the shadows of a nearby cliff. He had somehow appeared without a sound, as if he had been there the entire time. waiting for them. His eyes glinted in the dim light, and his presence was unsettling. "Didn't expect you to be here so quickly," Jace said, keeping his voice level. "This place doesn't seem like much of a sanctuary." Vero tilted his head slightly, as if considering Jace's words. "This planet is not what it seems. You're safe here, for now. But there's much you need to understand. Come with me." Jace exchanged a glance with Mara. She looked just as confused as he felt, but they both knew they didn't have many options. They followed Vero as he led them toward a hidden entrance at the base of the cliff. The entrance was barely noticeable, concealed by rocks and overgrown plants. Jace had no idea how Vero had found it, or if he had been here before. As they stepped inside, the dim lighting revealed a large underground complex, much more advanced than anything Jace had expected. The walls were lined with high-tech consoles and equipment, and the air hummed with the sound of machinery working in the background. It looked like a place built for someone with a lot of resources, far more than a single person should have. "This is where you'll find the answers you seek," Vero said, turning to face them. "I've been watching you, Captain Riker. Your ship, your crew, you are caught in something far bigger than the Draxari. You've been chosen for a purpose." Before Jace could ask more, a soft beeping came from one of the consoles. Vero walked over, tapping a few buttons, and the screen flickered to life. Images of planets, star systems, and alien ships appeared. Jace felt a chill run down his spine as he saw familiar faces among the images, the Draxari ships, as well as others he didn't recognize. Other factions, perhaps even more dangerous than the Draxari, were circling closer. The walls were closing in. "This is why you need to be ready," Vero said, his voice steady. "The galaxy is on the brink of a war, and you are right in the middle of it." Jace Riker stood before the massive holographic map, his fingers brushing lightly over the controls. The images on the screen flickered, displaying the known regions of the galaxy, as well as several new coordinates that were unfamiliar to him. A series of symbols and ships hovered above certain star systems, some marked with a red warning, others green with a hopeful glow. The map was filled with danger, uncertainty, and a growing sense of dread. "So, what now?" Mara Calder asked, standing beside him. She had a sharp look in her eyes, but there was a hint of worry in her voice. She had always been the one to keep a cool head, but even she was rattled by the situation they found themselves in. "We prepare," Jace said, his voice steady, but inside, his mind raced. Vero's warning about the galaxy on the brink of war weighed heavily on him. They couldn't afford to ignore it. The Draxari were only one threat among many, and if what Vero said was true, the stakes were higher than ever. Jace felt a strange mixture of responsibility and unease. He wasn't just leading a crew anymore. He was part of something much bigger, and the weight of that responsibility was pressing down on him. Vero, who had been watching silently from across the room, spoke up. "The forces you're up against are not just military. Some are political, others, far more ancient." His voice was calm, but there was an intensity to it that made Jace listen carefully. "The Draxari are merely pawns in a much larger game. You need to understand the stakes, Captain. And you need to be ready for what's coming." "Ancient." Mara raised an eyebrow, her skepticism clear. "You expect us to believe there are old forces at play here? Like what?" "Gods." Vero's gaze met Mara's, and for a moment, his eyes seemed to pierce through her. "Not gods, but close. There are beings, forces that have shaped the history of the galaxy, hidden from most, and now they are resurfacing." Jace exchanged a glance with Mara. The more Vero spoke, the more it felt like they were diving into something far beyond their understanding. But there was no turning back now. The Stellar Hawk was deep into this mess, and they had no choice but to keep moving forward. "Then what do we do?" Jace asked, the uncertainty in his voice masked by his resolve. Vero turned back to the holographic map. "We find the Nexus. It's a location of great significance, where the threads of the galaxy's fate converge. If you can reach it, you'll be able to influence the course of the war that's coming. But be warned, others are searching for it too. Jace's heart raced. The Nexus. It sounded like something out of legend, something that could change everything. But who else was looking for it? And why? He had no idea, but he knew this. They had to find it first. Where is it? Jace demanded. Vero hesitated for a moment before pointing to a distant, uncharted sector of the galaxy. Here, but it won't be easy. The path to the Nexus is guarded by powerful forces, and once you get close, you'll be under constant surveillance. The enemy is already moving. Jace turned to Mara, who was studying the coordinates intently. It's a long shot, she said. But we don't have much choice, do we? Jace shook his head. No, we don't. Vero stepped forward, his expression grave. You're not just fighting for survival anymore. You're fighting for the future of the galaxy itself. The Draxari, the other factions, they all have their eyes on the Nexus. If they find it first, it could tip the scales in their favor. You can't let that happen. Mara crossed her arms, clearly conflicted. I get it, but we can't just rush into a trap. We need a plan. I agree, Jace said, his mind already working through the possibilities. The Draxari would be waiting for them. And there were others out there who might be just as dangerous, if not more so. We need to gather more intel. We can't go in blind. Vero nodded slowly. That's why I brought you here. I'll provide you with all the information you need, and I have resources that can help. But you must act quickly. The longer you wait, the more dangerous it becomes. Jace felt the weight of Vero's words settle over him. They were standing at the edge of something monumental, and there was no going back. The battle was no longer just about surviving. It was about choosing the future. Then let's move, Jace said. We'll gather what we need, and we'll be ready to make our move on the Nexus. We don't have much time. Mara nodded, her determination matching his. Let's get it done, Captain. As they turned to prepare for the journey ahead, Jace couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Something, or someone, was out there, waiting. The path to the Nexus would not be easy, and it would cost them more than they could imagine. But they had no choice. The galaxy's fate was on the line, and they were the only ones who could stop it from falling into the wrong hands. The Stellar Hawk cruised through space, the hum of its engines a steady rhythm in the quiet of the ship's command center. Jace Riker sat at the helm, his eyes fixed on the swirling stars outside. The coordinates Vero had given them led to a narrow space between two giant asteroid fields. It was a dangerous path, but Jace couldn't help but think it was the perfect place to hide, or for an ambush. He glanced at Mara Calder, who was monitoring the ship's sensors. She'd been unusually quiet for the past few hours, her eyes darting across the screens, scanning for anything that could pose a threat. The tension between them had grown since their last conversation with Vero. They had no idea who to trust anymore, but one thing was certain. The closer they got to the Nexus, the more dangerous the galaxy seemed to become. Anything on the scanners? Jace asked, his voice calm but carrying a note of urgency. Mara didn't look up but shook her head. Nothing yet, but that doesn't mean we're in the clear. The Draxari, hell, even the other factions, could be anywhere. Jace's eyes narrowed. The silence around them felt wrong, too quiet for comfort. Let's stay sharp. We're getting close. As the Stellar Hawk made its way through the asteroid field, Jace couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The danger felt palpable, as if something was just waiting for the right moment to strike. The space around them was filled with drifting debris and dense asteroids, perfect cover for an ambush. Mara suddenly stiffened, her eyes locked onto the main display. Wait, there's something. Before she could finish, the ship's warning system blared to life, flashing red alerts across the screen. Jace's heart skipped a beat. Draxari ships, Mara muttered under her breath. They found us. Jace slammed his hand down on the control panel, his mind racing. They were in the middle of an asteroid field, no clear path for escape, and the Draxari were closing in fast. There was no way they could outrun them in a straight line. Their best chance was to use the field to their advantage, if they could make it out alive. "Shields up," Jace barked. "Get ready for evasive maneuvers. We need to lose them." The ship lurched as Mara quickly adjusted their course, the stellar hawk weaving through the debris. Jace's fingers danced over the controls, his eyes scanning the field for any opening. He could hear the sound of the Draxari ships growing closer, their engines humming ominously in the distance. They were hunting them, and it wouldn't take long for the Draxari to surround them. "They're too fast," Mara shouted, her face pale as she worked frantically to keep the ship moving. "We can't outrun them in this field." "We don't have to outrun them. We just need to outsmart them," Jace said through gritted teeth. He looked at the redouts, calculating their options. There was an asteroid cluster up ahead, dense enough to block their pursuers for a moment, if they could get close enough. "Hold on," Jace commanded as he pushed the throttle forward. The stellar hawk surged ahead, the asteroid field growing denser by the second. Mara's grip tightened on the console as they shot toward the cluster. She kept her focus, avoiding large rocks but getting dangerously close to others. The ship groaned under the strain as they pushed its limits. "Almost there," Jace muttered, his heart racing. A sudden explosion rocked the ship, shaking the crew to their core. A blast from one of the Draxari ships had grazed the stellar hawk's hull, sending the ship into a tailspin. Jace gritted his teeth and regained control, pulling hard on the throttle to right their path. "We've got incoming," Mara yelled, her eyes wide with panic. Another wave of enemy ships was coming in from behind. They couldn't escape unless they did something drastic. Jace's mind raced. He had one chance. He slammed the comms button. "All hands, brace for impact. We're going through." Without waiting for a response, he slammed the ship's throttle to maximum, plunging straight into the asteroid cluster. The rocks ahead were huge, bigger than anything they'd ever faced, but it was their only shot. They had to break the Draxari's pursuit. The ship darted between the massive asteroids, narrowly missing one that exploded on impact with a Draxari ship. Jace's hands were steady, but the tension in his chest was unbearable. He could feel the heat from the Draxari ship's blasts grazing the edges of the stellar hawk's shields. They needed a miracle. As they entered the gap, the ship's hull scraped against the rocks, the sparks flying around them. The Draxari ships were right behind them, but as they followed, they were forced to slow down, giving Jace a precious moment to gain some distance. "We're through," Mara breathed, her voice filled with disbelief. Jace exhaled sharply. "For now. Let's not celebrate too soon." The stellar hawk drifted silently through the cold expanse of space, the hum of the engines now a steady, almost soothing sound. Jace Riker sat at the helm, eyes fixed on the distant horizon. The journey to the Nexus had been long and filled with uncertainty, but they were closer now than ever before. The closer they got, the more Jace could feel the weight of the galaxy pressing down on them. Every choice, every move, was now a step toward an unknown future. Mara Calder, standing beside him, glanced at the redouts. Her face was a mask of concentration, but Jace could see the tension in her shoulders. They were almost there, just one more jump, and they would enter the uncharted sector where the Nexus was said to lie. And yet, as they neared the coordinates Vero had provided, the air on the ship seemed to grow heavier. There was something in the stillness of space, something unsettling. It was as if the galaxy itself was holding its breath. "Ready for the jump?" Jace asked, his voice quiet but filled with urgency. Mara's fingers hovered over the controls, but she hesitated. "There's something off about this sector," she said, her eyes scanning the screens once more. "The readings are strange, almost like we're being pulled in by something." Jace frowned. He had noticed it too. The stars here weren't like the ones they had passed before. There was an eerie silence, as if no one had traveled this way in centuries. But there was no turning back. They had come too far to hesitate now. "Keep your focus," Jace said, trying to push the unease out of his mind. "We'll be fine. Just get us there." Mara nodded, though the doubt in her eyes didn't disappear. She engaged the hyperdrive, and the stellar hawk lurched forward, the stars outside stretching into bright lines as the ship tore through the fabric of space. Moments later, the ship dropped out of hyperdrive, and a vast, unknown expanse lay before them. The stars here were dimmer, scattered in strange patterns that didn't make sense. It was as though they had stepped into a different part of the universe altogether. The Nexus, according to Vero, was somewhere in this dark void, a place where the very fabric of reality itself seemed thin. But nothing could have prepared them for what they were about to see. "Jace," Mara whispered, her voice barely audible. Jace's heart skipped a beat as he looked out the view screen. There, floating in the midst of the void, was a massive structure unlike anything he had ever seen. It was a colossal ring, its edges glowing faintly with a pale blue light. The ring was surrounded by smaller debris, fragments of old ships and technology, scattered across the area like forgotten relics. "The Nexus," Jace murmured, the words almost lost on him. This was it. They had found it. But as he gazed upon the enormous structure, a sense of dread washed over him. This was no simple space station or abandoned relic. This was something ancient, something far beyond anything they could have imagined. "We need to approach carefully," Mara said, her voice tinged with caution. She adjusted the ship's course, steering the stellar hawk toward the Nexus, but there was no denying the tension in her movements. Every instinct told her to be wary, to avoid getting too close. But they had no choice. The closer they got, the more Jace could feel the pull of the Nexus. It was as if the very space around them was alive, vibrating with energy. He glanced at the scanners. The readings were off the charts, far beyond anything the ship was designed to handle. The closer they got, the more the stellar hawk seemed to struggle against an invisible force. "We're being pulled in," Mara said, her eyes wide with concern. "Steady," Jace ordered, gripping the controls. "We can't stop now. If we turn back, we'll lose everything." The stellar hawk crept closer to the ring. The ship shook violently, the hull creaking under the strain of the intense gravitational pull. Jace could feel it now, the power of the Nexus wrapping around them, squeezing them toward the unknown. Suddenly, the lights flickered and then went out completely. The ship was engulfed in darkness, and for a brief moment, Jace could hear only the sound of his own breathing. Then, a pulse of energy shot through the ship, and the lights flickered back to life. When they did, the view screen was filled with an entirely different sight. The Nexus was no longer just a structure in space. It had transformed into something alive, a massive network of glowing lines. Jace's mind raced. "What the hell is this?" he whispered. But deep down, he knew this was no longer just about survival. They were standing at the edge of something much bigger, something that could reshape the galaxy itself. "We need to get out of here," Mara said, panic rising in her voice. But it was too late. The ship was locked in place, drawn into the heart of the Nexus. There was no turning back now. The stellar hawk shuddered violently, its engines screaming in protest as the ship was pulled deeper into the core of the Nexus. Jace Riker gripped the control panel, his knuckles white, but he couldn't shake the feeling that nothing he did would change the inevitable. The Nexus had them in its grip, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't break free. Mara Calder stood beside him, her eyes wide with fear as she desperately tried to regain control of the ship. "This isn't normal. We can't stop it. The energy readings are off the charts," she exclaimed, her fingers moving rapidly over the controls, but the ship remained trapped, its path directed straight into the center of the Nexus. Suddenly, the ship lurched forward, and the entire view screen flickered. For a moment, the universe outside seemed to dissolve into a blur of light and shadow. Then the stellar hawk came to a sudden halt, as if hitting an invisible wall. The ship's hull groaned, its systems struggling to adapt to the overwhelming forces at play. The crew was caught in a space between reality and something much more dangerous, a place that defied every known law of physics. Jace let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, his chest tightening. The room was eerily silent, save for the soft hum of the ship's systems attempting to stabilize. He exchanged a glance with Mara. There was no telling what was about to happen, but they had crossed a point of no return. And then the impossible happened. A voice, not through the ship's comm system, but within their minds, resonated through the very fabric of space. It was deep, ancient, and filled with an unimaginable power. "You have arrived." The voice echoed, reverberating through their consciousness, causing a strange, uncomfortable weight in the air. "You are the ones I have chosen." Jace's heart raced. The voice was not human. This was something far beyond anything he had encountered. He looked at Mara, her face pale, a mixture of confusion and awe. Chosen for what? He found himself asking aloud, though he knew it wasn't directed at anyone in the room. The voice answered, its tone now colder, more authoritative. "I am the Nexus. I am the convergence of all knowledge, the keeper of untold power. You are here because you, human, hold the key. Your kind, fragile and insignificant, in comparison to the beings of the galaxy, possess a power that even the ancient races of the universe could not foresee." Jace's mind was spinning. The Nexus wasn't just a place. It was something alive, aware, and connected to everything. But how could that be possible? And why had they been chosen? It didn't make sense. They were just a group of survivors trying to find their place in a hostile universe, not key players in some ancient cosmic design. "What power?" Mara whispered, her voice barely audible as she stood frozen by the console, seemingly entranced by the voice in their minds. The Nexus didn't answer her question immediately. Instead, it allowed the silence to hang in the air for a moment, letting the tension build. Finally, it spoke again, this time more slowly, as though it was letting the weight of its words settle over them. "You, human, carry within you the spark of creation. Your species, though young, has an innate ability to shake the universe around you. You are the architects of the future, the ones who will determine whether this galaxy survives or falls into oblivion. You and your kind are far more powerful than you realize." Jace could hardly believe what he was hearing. The spark of creation. It sounded like some kind of ancient prophecy, but he couldn't ignore the feeling that there was truth in those words. He glanced over at Mara, who looked as shocked as he felt. "We're just people," Jace muttered under his breath. "We're not gods. We're not anything like that." The voice in their minds responded, not with words, but with an overwhelming presence, like a flood of memories and visions, all crashing into Jace's consciousness at once. He saw glimpses of humanity's history, of their struggles and triumphs, of wars fought and worlds lost. But then he saw something more, a glimpse of humanity's potential, the path they could take if they embraced their power. "You have only begun to unlock your potential," the Nexus continued, its voice now tinged with something almost like admiration. "But time is short. The galaxy teeters on the brink of destruction. The old races are dying, their influence." Jace's mind raced. Destruction. The old races dying. What was happening? Who was causing it? And why had they, just two humans, been thrust into the middle of it all? The vision faded, leaving Jace and Mara standing in silence, the weight of the Nexus's words hanging heavily in the air. Jace could feel the enormity of what they had just learned settling on his shoulders. The fate of the galaxy was in their hands. But how? Why? What could two humans possibly do against forces this vast?